Evo Japan has just concluded, and as of the time of recording, we are 3 months out from the release of Tekken 8. This might be the biggest patch I've ever seen for Tekken. Tekken obviously new to regular patches as of Tekken 7. So this is kind of uncharted territory. Not uncharted territory isn't fair to say, but this is new. Doing these kinds of changes is pretty new. So it took about an hour and a half for me to read all these changes on stream. So I just want to give you the highlights. If you want to see the full VOD or anything, I have a VODs channel on YouTube. You can go to the Twitch VOD, things like that. Okay, let's take a bird's eye view and then dig into the changes that I felt really mattered. There's a lot of quality of life changes and like stability changes, which is really cool, but not really worth digging into too deeply unless it has big implications on how the character functions. So, patch is due for May 8th delivery. And they're planning already a patch 1.05 in June. So this is 1.04, 1.05 in June. The 3 targets for characters that they want to adjust are, number 1, characters who haven't been able to show their uniqueness. So probably buffing them, right? Number 2, characters with disproportionately strong moves or high combo damage. And then number 3, they want to adjust situations where one player has a insanely dominant attacking advantage, right? Especially where it's difficult to apply any kind of defensive counterplay. And you could see here that for category 3, the defensive counterplay, they want to specifically allow you to sidestep more and adjust the battle systems to be less oppressive, specifically for everybody, I imagine. So, other point of interest is that characters that weren't adjusted in this patch, they named specifically Victor, Lili, King, Paul, and Yoshimitsu. They are planning adjustments in the next patch in June. Okay, there are more. This whole page is system changes, and I'll talk about the specific ones I like in a second. But my immediate concern is how these patches are not seemingly planned around the major tournaments that are coming up. The initial tournament season for the US, it's on, and the US is kind of the international hub for a lot of tournaments as well. Combo Breaker is the 3rd week of May. This patch comes out May 8th. So all of these changes, we will have about 2 weeks to work with. A bit less than 2 weeks, actually. So not only does that kind of produce a lot of variance, to me it reduces the quality of the Tekken, because attackers will have these brand new strategies that defenders have not had a chance to study, lab, and gain experience with. Additionally, attackers may not have mastered how to attack with these new tactics. So the Tekken will be kind of, juvenile is not the word I want to use, but like underdeveloped, where you're just going to see a lot of layer 1 stuff. And it's kind of why Eddy was so strong in Evo Japan. So many of the strings he had that were duckable, people weren't prepared to duck. I have this sneeze that is welling up that I can't get to happen, but I'll keep talking and I'm going to randomly sneeze. So that's your warning. It's going to come up at some point in my speech. But yeah, Eddy was doing so well with strings that couldn't be ducked, or could be ducked, and people just weren't prepared for it. So with quick changes like this, you're likely to see that kind of underdeveloped Tekken more often, and that's less exciting to me from a competitive standpoint. And especially with the June patch planned, this is very quickly before Evo. And with Combo Breaker, CEO, and Evo being the big 3 tournaments in the US, this is kind of a very unstable time for very expensive, prestigious tournaments. And that's not the most exciting thing for competitors. As someone who wants to compete more, trying to find footing in this competitive space, it is hard when so many changes are happening. And these changes are necessary because we're in the arcade release of Tekken 8. But it's a tough place to be in as a competitor, for sure. Okay. Other last things, cons. They're doubling down on some system changes that I disagree with. I can't say they're objectively bad, I just disagree with them. There's a pattern of skill expression removal. We'll get to that, especially with the Steve changes. And there are extreme changes. Some game warping nerfs that, even though I thought they were justified, are a bit extreme. And some seemingly reckless extreme buffing. Extreme. I say that to really emphasize that like these changes are kind of crazy. I think that Tekken is a very sensitive game to changes. Steve is always 1 buff away from being insanely oppressive, for example. And I think we have to be so careful with these kinds of changes. That said, it is still the first, again, 3 months of Tekken 8. We have a lot of time going forward, hopefully, as long as the player base is kept pretty happy. And something I think I love is that this openly communicated philosophy is pervasive throughout. Long ass intro, let's get to the changes, right? So lots of system changes, lots of stability changes. The ones I want to highlight are very minimal, but very important. So rage arts in general were just stabilized. You'll see this throughout the entire cast. They keep mentioning rage art stabilized, like easier to hit, will whiff less, stuff like that. The other interesting change is that slow motion behavior is normalized. So slow motion, especially in Tekken 7, would change the properties of moves, either evasiveness or hitboxes or frames in the worst case. So making sure that slow motion behaves properly is really important. There was also a downed state wake up bug. This one's really, really important. Doing a unique character getup or the while rising 4 from face down feet away would turn off the stage hazards. So they, if you want to see what the bug looks like, that's in a previous video. I think it's called like I tried to be optimistic about the Tekken changes. This is a huge change, obviously, just to make sure that the stage hazards function as intended. But they didn't mention that while rising 4 from the face down position. So I'm curious if they omitted that on purpose because they couldn't fix it yet, or if it's included in this change. The other big change is the nerf to strong aerial tailspins. So strong aerial tailspins, if you ever fight a Dragunov or a Feng, you'll see them, or a Nina especially, they'll be spinning you over and over and over again. After 3 of these, the knockback is increased now. So combos will hopefully be a bit less obnoxious and high damage and consistent for these high combo damage characters already. Those are the main important ones, I think, for the overall system. Now let's talk about specific characters. So again, lots of small changes. There were a lot of characters had this weird, like, you could duck high moves faster phenomenon happening as the defender. So you'll see a lot of these changes if you go through the patch notes. But otherwise, the specific character balance targets had this little opener where they talked about the character philosophy. And they linked back to these ideas of their 3 key points: buffing uniqueness, nerfing extreme moves and combo damage, and increasing like defensive counterplay for the defender. So let's take a look. Asuka's the great first example. So they wanted to improve her new Tekken 8 elements. So Naniwa Gusto, her buff stance, or her buffed install, where she glows blue, and her destabilizer like stance. It's like a really mini situation. So you'll see a lot of stability changes here. And then the big ones are, okay, forward, 1+2, this running 1+2. So normally it was just a knockdown move with plus frames. Now it does a tornado on counter hit. And reducing the knockback distance lets Asuka apply mix-ups more easily with those plus frames. Once she has Naniwa Gusto, it says damage reduced, but it's not really a nerf because now it's a tornado on normal or counter hit. So it's always going to launch when she has her install. Additionally, she gets +11 instead of +6. And it's a wall splat. I believe it was a wall splat before, or maybe just only at point blank. But now it's a reliable wall splat, I think is the point. And this is a big change. Asuka is traditionally a defensive character who wants you to attack into her. So she struggled against turtles. These moves, especially this running move, gives her a lot of offensive pressure that can incentivize the opponent to do something, right? And that helps her play into the strong parts of her kit more often. And these future changes also play into that. So Destabilizer, this throw, doesn't actually do damage by itself, but it gives her a quick mix-up. She has 2, which is a mid, and 4, which is a low. The low is no longer launch punishable. It was a knockdown low. This seems excessive, except for the fact that Destabilizer is duckable. Not that you would be ducking like that easily and reacting anyways. But this seems like a decent adjustment to the risk reward. I generally would say be careful making things not launch punishable. King had a lot of really high reward lows that they took away the launch punish on, and now he's just able to abuse them very freely. Especially with the nerfed low parry system, this is kind of scary. The mid, though, is also a big change. It used to be -9, now it's -3. This lets Asuka play things like sidestep 2. She can play her parries still. She can play hop kick, can, low evasion, low crushing. Tons of options here. This gives her a lot more flexibility using this throw. And the chip damage on block is obviously a nice to have as well. Azucena. Huge problematic character that dominated the Korean scene. Arslan is a big Azucena player. These are huge changes. And actually, this falls in my realm of game warping nerfs. Right? They're not just tweaking a few moves from her. They are trying to change the way she plays overall. And they even mention that here. Instead of relying on low-risk pokes, they want her to play more stances, right? And play more of that high-octane, caffeinated style, which I think is actually really cool. I think that it's cool that the character's animations, voice lines, and theme all line up together. And I like the character for that, but I would agree that her low-risk poking style was more effective. I'm half excited for this, but again, majors are coming up really soon. Azucena players may have to scramble to either find a new play style or find a better character that they vibe with, because this is very, very... these changes are very significant. 1-1 is now -10. It would go into stance on hit only. So it used to be -9 and safe, but now it is jab punishable, and to make it easier to punish, they reduced the pushback on the second hit. It's also easier to evade the jab with sidesteps. So her poking significantly nerfed here. 1-1 was pretty safe to just throw out. 2-1, Arslan loves this move if you watched his Azucena. Again, easier to sidestep. Now the recovery frame of the second attack is increased by 4 frames. I'm not sure about the significance of this change because it didn't say change the frame data necessarily. But they explicitly mentioned the frame data right after. So if you read the patch notes, sometimes they say recovery time increased, but the frame data stays the same. In this case for Azucena, it looks like the recovery and the frame data change. So instead of being -3, she's down -7 on her 2-1. Instead of +7 on hit, she's only +3. Now, she does have the extension, the high punch, but this gives her way less of a lead and advantageous situation by throwing out these safe pokes, which is the intent they mentioned, but is a significant change. The playstyle is going to have to change. Down forward 1-4-1. This is her jailing mid-high string and the high extension that counter hit launches. First 2 hits are no longer delayable. That is kind of a big change. It reduces the mental stack of defending against this, and because you could duck the second hit if it was delayable. Now she has to do it at full speed. Damage reduced from 17 to 13 on the first 2 hit, on the second hit only. Sorry, and the hitbox has also become easier to sidestep. So there were situations where you would try to step her down forward 1. And the second hit would track you. So again, nerfed poking. And then it looks like the third hit could sometimes hit when your opponent's behind you. So a bit more like visual clarity, like don't get hit if I'm swinging the other way. Even though they nerfed a bunch, they gave her down back 3 a little buff, 2 damage, and this automatically goes into back turn stance. So I like buffs like this. Clearly aligns with their philosophy, and with these other nerfs, it makes sense to have down back 3 buffed. Now her down back 4, her other key low poke that crushes highs, goes under jabs and things like that, lost 4 damage. So it felt like almost the down back 3 was necessary to buff because of that nerf. Back 1-1 is also buffed. Not a commonly used string, so clearly trying to add other parts to her kit, or kind of make other parts of her kit shine. And they also made it whiff a bit less. And this is another common thing in many of the strings that the characters run through, less whiffing. Okay, forward 4. This is another huge change you'll see in a lot of the characters. Combo scaling after hit has been adjusted. So Azucena forward 4 is like not like an axe kick, but she does like a downward kick, it puts the opponent in crouch, and she gets a guaranteed crouch throw. And it was doing tons of damage. So by forcing the scaling to 70%, the guaranteed follow-ups do less damage. And a lot of characters were nerfed this way. But the big one is running 3-2. It has lost 7 damage on the second hit and is now no longer +5 but only +2. What I believe this will mean is that her pokes are now sidesteppable. So running 3-2 was really annoying because if you tried to sidestep after this, she could track you with 2-1, or down forward 1-4 was really hard to step as well. And obviously her down forward 2 became a frame trap. None of these are the case anymore. So it seems like the only value for this move is the fact that it does chip damage, like a lot of chip damage. The +2 is obviously nice so you can play jabs or things like that, but aside from that, it's barely any advantage. The only other thing I can think of is she has a counter hit high 1+2, and that will trade with a down forward 1 mid poke at this frame number. So huge nerf to her advantage. She's gonna have to play completely differently, playing a lot of stance mind games and things like that. I'm surprised they didn't buff the stances directly. I played a bunch of Azucena in the betas, and there's a period of time before her stance gains the evasive property. So unless they buff that, I feel like she's just going to be immensely weaker, right? This is what I feel like is a game warping nerf, not only from Azucena in the meta, but just thinking about being an Azucena player. How much differently will you have to play? What different style will you have to learn now? Obviously, pro players can adapt, but in 2 weeks before a big tournament, I think that's going to be the quality of play we're going to see is going to drop. If we even continue to see Azucena, they might just drop the character altogether. Yeah. On the flip side, we get a big buff with Bryan in this next patch. Bryan, a very popular character, high execution, very cool to see on the screen. They specifically mention increasing his heat smash power and snake eyes, his install buff, kind of like Asuka. We'll talk about the changes before I share my opinion. So damage increased by 10 for his heat smash, and frame advantage from +9 to +15. So when Bryan is +18, he gets a guaranteed taunt. That's an unblockable. So we're not quite at that range yet, but +15 is a lot. His jet upper 14 frames becomes like uninterruptible completely, right? This clearly is to shut off like rage arts as an option and give him access to more of his moveset after a heat smash is blocked. Pretty scary stuff for the defender. Kind of seems to go against the philosophy of buffing defensive options in oppressive situations. But the counter argument is that it's a heat smash, right? So he's blowing all of his resources to get this mix up. I think it's a bit whack to give Bryan this advantage for free. I say for free because it's like a safe option that you could just throw out. You could heat burst, heat smash, you're at a huge advantage. But we'll have to see how it plays out. It's hard to conclude anything without seeing it and playing against it. Now, other small quality of life things that are important. If you power crushed his 3+4 or down forward 2-3, he could evade the follow-up, and that was kind of cheap, so they took that away. They increased the reliability of like his flip over with QCB4. But the big one is that Snake Eyes 3+4-2, when he charges it, can no longer be power crushed or reversed. They say no longer possible to mitigate, so maybe you can armor through it. But my understanding is that this is just going to blow up that defensive option. Again, I thought we were buffing defensive options. Not sure how that plays out here. Finally, they showed this string in like a trailer after Evo Japan. Forward 2-1, 2-3-2, and it's tons of changes. The heat consumption has changed. The individual frames on the different string hits are changed. I'm assuming the last hit is unchanged because they didn't mention anything. Clearly, they want to see us use this string more. And to be honest, it's a cool string. Like, I think it looks very visually cool, so I don't mind them buffing it. But it is kind of like, it's a lot, right? So people are going to have to study up, and you don't have a lot of time. 2 weeks before the next major tournament. Minor changes with Claudio, things like that. Devil Jin, minor changes, but the big one is the heat smash. They reduced the tracking on the heat smash because it's already full screen. Now it gives you more counterplay outside of just block or rage art on a read. So cool stuff to see this change. One other cool change is that his laser scraper, the third hit now tracks reliably if the second hit hits. So good stuff on that. I like reliability changes and kind of balancing out these insane moves and then kind of staying hands off and letting Devil Jin players cook with this. This style of change I really, really like. Nerf the insanely problematic move, like this category 2 stuff, and then see what happens. Like, we don't know a lot yet. Again, still month 3. Biggest change. I don't know. Biggest change? One of the biggest changes of the patch. Dragunov. So, again, he had outstanding moves, outstanding combo damage, and very one-sided situations, right? They specifically mentioned down back 3+4, his hatchet kick, and talk about their buff philosophy and nerf philosophy there. They didn't really buff it. It's the nerf philosophy, right? This is really cool to see, again, this amount of clarity, which is unprecedented for Tekken patch culture. So, let's take a look at the Dragunov changes. Standing 4 is nerfed. I believe this is a combo damage change because he uses this in a bunch of his combos. 5 damage is significant, but consider that depending on where it happens in the combo, the scaling might be different. Because of the other nerfs they give him, they actually buff His forward 3, 1+2. This is a mid kick into like an overhead 2 punches, double fist or whatever. And it's a heat engager, heat engage launcher as well. So they made it -3, so you can still play the game with like side steps, parries, back dashes after the fact. And I like that. I like that they're considering that they're doing a lot of nerfing and that they may need compensation. And they tried to be kind of tactical about it. I think that's cool. Some quality of life stuff. The homing move, down forward 3+4, the strong aerial tailspin is nerfed in damage. And then a change to his Okuzeme. Down 4 was hitting differently than they wanted it to. So we'll have to see what the new reaction is when you down 4 somebody on the ground. Hatchet kick nerf. This is the big one. So the range is reduced because the forward movement is reduced. Increase the distance on a grounded and downed hit. So less, I think he had a opportunity to running to you. And if you stood up, you would get hit. So this probably takes away that situation. 4 frames of recovery time added. So it's no longer +7 and it's probably... Oh, sorry. It's no longer +7 and it's now +3. Now, what I was saying probably is because they say they alter Dragunov's behavior when it's blocked to ensure any character can punish with an aerial combo starter. To me, this reads as it's now a stagger low. So kind of like Snake Edge or Law's Dragon Tail. When you block this, the player is probably going to stagger. And that means any character can launch it. And I think that's why they didn't mention the frame data. It's probably now just launch punishable by the entire cast, as they said, any character. Back 4 no longer hits grounded. So they mentioned the whole string because there's also balance changes with that combo scaling if the last hit counter hits. But yeah, no longer hitting grounded is really, really nice. That move was kind of crazy. Like a mid poke with a string extension that could also hit grounded. And then some stability stuff with his QCF2, this like elbow, tornado stuff, both in the string and by itself. Sometimes it would slip under the opponent, and that was crazy. But here is an insane change. Running 2. From +6 to +4, you might be thinking that's just 2 frames, but that changes a lot. So the damage nerfs, I'm not too concerned about. I think that's pretty reasonable considering how Dragunov was kind of just pumping out damage freely. But the frame advantage is crazy because Dragunov's throws are 11 and 12 frames, right? So an 11 frame throw at +6 would frame trap rage arts. It would frame trap parries, and it would frame trap armor moves, right? And I believe because it comes out at the same frame as the parry, frame 5, it would be an unbreakable throw. So Dragunov had a situation where he could do running 2 and throw you, and it would shut down your counterplay. So this is in alignment with this category 3 situation. But there's a lot of other changes as well. His back 4 was a frame trap. His down forward 2 was a frame trap, so you couldn't jab either of those moves. And now at +4, his down forward 2 loses to jab, and his back 4 trades with jab. So he no longer gets the back 4-3 heat engage threat after running 2. This is really, really big. This forces him to lean more into that movement poking style that he was known for in the past. And I think players like Fear of Silence and NA will benefit from this a lot because he was an old school Dragunov player from Tekken 7. I say old school. Really, it's a new gen from Tekken 7. But that style seems to be what they're leaning towards rather than Dragunov just throwing out big moves constantly. So I like these changes. I definitely game warping will be interesting to see. Dragunov definitely deserved it, but this is crazy. Running 4, again, combo damage nerf. This was his wall tornado where he knees you, punches you, hums to himself, and kicks again. And then they tell you that even though the damage is down by 8, it really amounts to 2 to 3 with most combo scaling situations. Okay. And here's what I was talking about before. Recovery time for down forward 1-4 is reduced by 2 frames, but no change to frame advantage on block. So I think this is to make it easier to combo if it counter hits. Takedown 1. Recovery time reduced by 4 to allow the opponent to get up, I think, without unintended follow-ups hitting them. So huge changes for Dragunov. I think the Dragunov, like, meta slaves will probably consider dropping him just because these changes are pretty significant, and now there are probably characters that can do the meta slave performance stronger. It's up for debate who, right? We haven't seen the patch come out yet, but I think Dragunov will reduce in play rate heavily because of this. Who is next? So Eddy, a lot of these changes are really minimal, and I actually like that a lot. So like +1 frame situation, you can sidestep his down forward 1 now. But he's so new that it's hard to know what's best, right? Again, in EVO Japan, most people were not ducking his strings at the pro level. So we need time to see Eddy settle, and I'm glad that they took a really minimal approach to Eddy's changes. Feng Wei, the third of the holy trinity of Azucena, Dragunov, and Feng. Top 3 in the game, almost undebatably. In my opinion, received the least amount of changes, and probably deserves more. So the quick one is that his... well, let's talk about their philosophy, right? So they wanted to weaken his heat 3+4, which was his ground pound. It guaranteed a mix-up after. It was super, super dumb. So nerfing that was, I feel like, almost a given. But his while crouching down forward 4-1 was an egregious move at high level. If you just did the first hit, you could go into back turn. If you do the second hit, you get frame advantage. And it used to be a staggered low. Like if you block the low, he staggers and you can launch him. But now there was a situation where you could block the first hit, try and visually confirm that you did, try to punish, and the second hit comes out. Or he never does the second hit, and now your punish either comes late, or you're hesitating and he hits you, or you wait for the second hit that never comes and he just resets to neutral. Right? So they call it here a suppression of both risk and return, and I thought that meant they would change it how everybody expected them to, how they changed Dragunov's hatchet kick, was to make it a stagger low. They did not do that. Instead, they increased the recovery of the first hit by 4 frames, so giving you more time to recognize that you blocked it and get a punish. This change ensures that if the opponent attempts a counterattack after blocking the first hit, they won't be hit by the second hit. So I like that on one hand, but it's still a lot of power to the Dragunov player, and it doesn't solve like to the Feng player. And this doesn't solve a lot of the low-level problems of dealing with this, right? So it's still an insanely strong move. But again, I'd want to play against it to be sure. The damage change is also interesting because now the first hit is still really strong. Okay. Last thing about Feng, though, is that his parries have been normalized. So parries are active on frame 5. He still had a punch parry on frame 2 and on frame 3, right? So they've normalized that. Very cool. And then damage changes to his strong aerial tailspin and a few other moves. I do feel like out of all these characters, the strongest, Feng was barely touched. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more of him, especially of the people who were playing Dragunov. Okay. Next significant change, Jack 8. They talk about buffing his Gamma Howl. That's his stances. His 2 stances, right? Well, I think Gamma Charge is the bubble shield and Gamma Howl is the stance. The most significant change, I think, is that he's going to start recovering health, the gray health, and heat when successfully landing Gamma Howl moves. Specifically, the Gamma Howl 3+4. Also, his Gamma Howl 1 being -9 now, this is the homing mid, is pretty crazy. Because you would want to duck the high, and if you block the mid, at least you got a block punish. But now, he has the safe option with the mid. It becomes a lot more spammable, and now the guard break is a lot scarier because you don't really get much out of... Or sorry, not the guard break. The high option with the kick. Whether he does the punch or the kick outside of heat, it just becomes so much more annoying because you're not going to get damage for dealing with that stance. And because you can't sidewalk it, this becomes like a very low counterplay, low interaction move. The strategy is probably to play your +9 frames after. I don't think Jack is in a super nasty spot, but small changes like this added up over time could make him very strong, as is the case with a bunch of Tekken characters. Okay. Character. June. First, I want to mention Jin. I think Jin's Heat Smash is really dumb. It can wall break from really far. It's almost impossible to step. It feels like a budget Devil Jin one, where like it is so oppressive that you kind of just have to respect it, like he's got a gun in your face. Surprised they didn't adjust it, but we'll see what happens as time goes on. The change to Jin's 1-2-1 and Zanshin up 1, where he like spins with the Devil Wing, you know. Your jab punishes would often miss, so I'm assuming this is a change to that, make it easier to punish. Anyways, Jun Kazama. These changes were really surprising to me. Now, I'm not a Jun down player. Even though we didn't see her in the top 8 of EVO Japan, I thought she was a really strong character. She's been doing strong in other regions, doing well in other regions like Saudi Arabia as well. But what they've done is they've really, really changed how she works. And I want to see it in action and get numbers before I draw too many conclusions. But they've basically said that they're making her Kazama power do permanent health damage in addition to great health damage, right? So they're saying that because she could recover health and heat, and it didn't really take any, she didn't take any great health damage and heat, she was too strong. So they wanted to nerf that. Understandable. But they also nerf how much she can heal with her like heat smash and things like that. So while I'm supportive of these nerfs because June was really, really oppressive, my gut reaction is this is too much. My gut reaction is that she can't kill herself with the Kazama power, right? So that's nice. But they've revised the health consumption rate. So some of it is no longer recoverable. I'm assuming that means some of it is still recoverable. But she can no longer spam her really, really OP moves. Fan of that. See, we'll have to see how it plays out. I do like that they reduced the tracking of the second hit of her heat smash. So the first laser and then the second Hadouken with like the crows is less likely to track you. And that's nice counterplay. I like changes like that a lot. She has similar like parry stability things that Asuka got. She's consuming less heat with forward 1+2. But yeah, just a surprising change that she's healing less and taking permanent health damage. I'll have to see how it plays out. It probably makes her play a bit slower, less of the big moves and more of her conservative poking and like Asuka adjacent defensive style. But isn't that the opposite of like the aggressive style they wanted? Confused about identity and what they're looking for here. And then a bunch of quality of life stuff as well. Okay, Kazuya. You have to talk about Kazuya if there's ever a patch. Really, really minimal stuff. Looks like hitbox is adjusted to make sure he's only hitting you from the front and never from the back or the side. There were some situations where this string was natural, I guess, even though it shouldn't be. Hitbox expanded downwards on his Demon Paw and his While Rising 2 so that it's less likely to just whiff. I think that's nice. Quality of life for those hitboxes. And then the second hit of his Hell Sweep extensions will always track now, I think, if the first hit hits. It's pretty weird landing the first hit of the Hell Sweep and the second hit misses. Anyways, so Kazuya, minimal changes. Surprised that Heaven's Gate is still only doing 1 damage. I wonder if they're going to address that in the June patch. June the month, not Kazama. King. Always have to talk about King as well. They nerfed his Heat Smash damage by 4. I appreciate that. I feel like it should be more, but, you know, can't talk too crazy about King. They'll come after me. It looks like there's a lot of these 1+2 window changes as well. I think hitting both buttons at the same time was probably weird, and they made it easier. This is a weird thing. Of his Shining Wizard, Giant Swing, and Tawana Twister, he gains more heat back when he lands it. So that's crazy. And then this low parry is also fascinating. King has a technique where I believe if you do giant, you run, hit Giant Swing, and then hold down forward. There's some combination of that input where he can basically do a Giant Swing out of running, and it looks like Shining Wizard. So this lack of low parry may be related to that technique, but it might also be something else entirely. The fact he can low parry, though, is nice. That makes sense. Like, quality of life, you should be able to low parry in situations where you can low parry. So, makes sense. But it looks like it's mostly quality of life and then heat buffs, and then nerfs to the Heat Smash. Strange changes for King, but at least it's something. Big change here, though. Kuma and Panda. They wanted to emphasize, again, their identity, so this is like a Category 1 change. Leverage their stances to deal chip damage and delete that chip damage, right? And then they wanted to buff Panda specifically by increasing the power of her heat state. So in addition to like raw damage numbers on the Heat Smash, there's a big change here. So up forward 3+4 in heat goes from 21 damage to 40 damage, and it consumes less heat. That's a lot of changes. Obviously, this move is probably going to become more spammable, like the Bear Electric. Probably so Panda can get chip damage. But now that Hunting Bear forward 1+2, the unbreakable throw where they bite you and kind of grab you by the neck and do all this, erases gray health. So they've developed a new archetype for the bears, which is do chip damage, delete the chip damage. This obviously helps them across the board, but is especially nice probably against characters like Yoshimitsu and formerly June, who would heal a lot, right? Bear Sit low poke damage is increased. That's obviously nice. Wait, is Bear Sit 1 the low poke, or is it 2? Chat can tell me real quick while I go to the next change. Collision has been adjusted to alleviate issues. Yep, collision. Yep, so lots of hitbox consistency stuff, which is always really important. Cool. Bear sit 1 is the poke. Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. 1 is the low poke, and then 2 is the launcher. Thank you, Gemini Hero. Lars changes. They buffed the heat smash damage, which is not what I expected. Combo stabilization, I like. Making it easier to punish his silent entry 2 is also nice. They kept the +5 change on his dynamic entry 3. So they still want his stance to be unrage artable. I wonder if they still want it to be unsteppable. Interesting choice. Law. So I think Law is a slept on character. Very, very strong character right now, especially with his 1-1-1 being a launcher in heat on counter hit launcher on heat. He's allowed to really beat you up. He has a slide, which is always horrifying to deal with. And now that he has the up forward 3, a safe heat dashing launcher out of the crouch, he can do it out of the slide stance. And the 1-1-1, he's just able to kind of beat you up. The nunchucks are a great whiff punish. They're hard to punish at different spacings. Law is a super nasty offensive character. So they didn't really touch him. They just made it. They did the Rage Art general like consistency buff. And then they reduced the combo damage scaling on his While Rising 4. Especially because on counter hit While Rising 4, he gets a bunch of Dragon Charge guaranteed moves. And reducing the damage to that is nice because he is beating you up all the time. And then back 4-3, I didn't even know this was an issue. Apparently, he didn't get a natural combo when he hit you from the back. So adjusted to hit continuously, even when hitting from behind. And Lee, I don't know what's with all these slide characters and hitting from behind, but it's the same thing with his forward 3-3-3-3-3. Apparently it would drop, and now it's consistent. And then there's a small change here too, with down back 3+4. Apparently it was hard to do after heat animations. I didn't know that was an issue. I don't play Lee, so cool quality of life stuff. Leroy, the #1 complaint about character in my YouTube comments. I could make a video about anybody, and in the comments somebody will say, buff Leroy. Or Leroy needs nerfing. And you might be thinking, I know this is a joke. Like, right, that's obviously a joke, PhiDX. Not a funny joke. And I see it all the time. I think I'm allowed to complain about it. Let's look at how they buff Leroy. They tell us, which is really nice. They want to improve the performance of Wing Chun style rapid strikes and parrying techniques, which are unique to Leroy. And they've expanded it to excel in both offense and defense. And they've even added moves like Sidestep 1+2. Chain Punch Seed can be performed from standard sidesteps. Pretty cool. Increase Heat Smash. It seems like they just give Heat Smash damage if the character is not doing well. Bryan had this happen. I don't know why Lars had this happen. Leroy had this happen. Seems to be like their go-to to make a character a bit stronger. It's just give him 5 heat damage. Heat Smash damage. He gains back heat when his chain punches hit. And now when he's doing chain punches, his heat gauge won't like deplete. So if he starts chain punching, he's not going to run out of heat, so he can do the heat dash, right? Quality of life stuff because this animation takes so much time. Increased opponent's recovery on block by 4 frames. Does that mean it's now like +4 more? It's hard to say. I wish they would say it explicitly because it's never really clear. Same thing here. Recovery time has been reduced by 4 frames. Does that mean it's 4 frames safer? Or is it just your opponent has 4 frames less to react to the fact that you stopped the string, right? Important question that we'll have to see when the patch comes out. Forward 3, 1+2. It used to be duckable on hit, which was surprising. I think this is a nice quality of life change. I don't know why a string would ever be duckable on hit. Unless it's a low, right? Like usually lows are duckable on hit if it's like a low high string. Not usually, but that's where you would see it. But the fact that it's coming, the fact that somebody could hit you with the mid and then you could duck it was a bit odd. So I think this change makes sense. Recovery time reduced by 4 frames. Again, is it minus frame better? Is it minus 4 frames like safer, or is it just the speed of recovery of both players? He gets gray health back now for parrying. A perfect parry gives him 5 health. Imperfect parry gives him 3, which is an interesting mechanic. I want to see how that works. If that is actually going to matter a lot. Like if people are just whiffing parries, it probably doesn't matter, right? After Twin Dragon Gate succeeds, damage for the final attack is buffed by 5, and then there's a wall stun. I believe that's where, not like wall splatting, but wall crushing. So they bounce up against the wall, they're in crouch, and you have a huge amount of plus frames. I think that's what this means. Back 3, this change is crazy. So it used to be on counter hit. You get the guaranteed Hermit stance 4, 1+2. Now it happens even on normal hit. So back 3 is a homing high, and now it has a guaranteed follow-up, which is pretty nasty. Pretty. Tracking after successful parry has been enhanced. That's cool. Hermit 1+2. These are more chain punches. Forward movement increased, so probably it whiffs less. Increased opponent's recovery by 8 frames. So does this mean it's like +8 better? In other patches, like we'll see up ahead for Zafina, they tell you the plus frames. So I don't know how this works. Does it just make it slower for them to act? You know what I mean? It's unclear. We'll have to see. And then his cane moves have better tracking after contact. So it doesn't whiff like midway through. And I like these changes. One thing that isn't really balance related, but I think would make Leroy more fun. The reason a lot of people I know don't play Leroy is because he feels slow. Even though he has these rapid chain punches and like quick moves, he just feels slow and clunky. And I think it's because you hit one button and he does a million punches. So it feels like it's playing a cutscene. But what if you hit one button and you had to press each punch? I think if he had that level of feedback like Steve used to have with his Gatling gun punches, it would be really fun to play Leroy, right? I think it'd be super fun to play Leroy. So I have a wish list thing that will probably never happen, that for punches, you get to press each button. I mean, Bryan has it with his machine gun punches, right? So I think it'd be cool if every character who does multiple punches had that style. Yeah, like Lee's Acid Storm, forward 3-3-3-3-3. The move is so satisfying because you hit each one. So would it be cool if, for Leroy, you hit, even if it has like a generous buffer, it doesn't have to be so precise that it has to be timed, but at least let me hit the buttons as many times. I think it would feel really good. And then they add a blue spark and stuff like that. That's a good suggestion. They could add blue sparks and stuff like that. So Leroy, a lot of buffs here. Hard to say how it's going to play out for the overall character. Because A, we don't see a lot of Leroy in the first place, and B, it's hard without a big sample size to know how effective the character can really be. There's probably a lot of stuff that hasn't been explored yet. They're clearly shoehorning him into this parry and chain punch style, so makes sense with the Wing Chun identity. I want to see people get nasty with Leroy and see what it looks like. You'll notice Lili has minor changes, but they did mention they'll target her in the next patch. Oh, I'm sad about that, but it has to happen. The character's really strong. Same with Paul. Paul is pretty strong, but all they've done is reduce heat smash tracking after the first hit and increase the second hit of Demo Man tracking. So like stability, consistency changes. Raven. Heat smash, easier to punish, I believe, if you sidestep it, because expanding the hurt box. But it's like a projectile. He sends like a shadow clone at you, so it's a bit weird. Tracking capability of the second hit has been enhanced exclusively when the first hit connects. Right, so similar to the Paul change, these are multi-hit moves. If the first hit connects, the second one tracks better. So less midway whiffing. And then hitbox enlargement on Wall Rising 4. Elisa had the same change. Reina, a character that is menacing in a first to 2. So her win rate is really low online, and I think that's because she has a lot that she asks a new player to learn. But a mid to high level Reina player is very hard to beat in tournament in a first to 2. She forces you to guess over and over. She controls the timing of the neutral with forward 4-2, and she has electric, she has hop kick, she has all the Mishima tools. A Mishima tool with neutral control like that is very scary. They didn't really touch any of Reina's strongest tools. So I believe Reina may shine a lot more, especially as Dragunov and Azucena have really dipped a bit. There are players who are very capable of executing what Reina is asking you to do, and this is going to be pretty scary. The only nerf being her like heat smash is pretty concerning. But at least we'll see more Reina. She is a really cool character design-wise. The big question of the day, Steve Fox. Steve Fox. Another one of the most complained about characters in the entire cast of Tekken 8. I play a lot of Steve. I played a lot of Steve in Tekken 7. I have a lot of opinions. I think Steve is the quintessential anti-Tekken character. Just by existing, you have to be afraid to use any of your buttons. You're forced to play really quick moves, otherwise you die to back 1. While you're trying to play quick moves, he can counter hit you with 1-2-1. If you try to low crush these or high crush these moves, 1-2-1 and back 1, he has down forward 2, which is a mid counter hit option. Yes, a lot of these tools are nerfed, But once you overcome the initial skill hump of Steve's stances, cancels, and finding like basic movement, defense, and counter hit timing, he becomes a really cheap character at high level. So these changes are very interesting to me as someone who has seen people kind of pocket pick Steve in Tekken 7. I think he's cool as a specialist character, and he's still cool even as like a pocket pick character, but because he's less technically satisfying in this game, I'm less interested in seeing him be so good that everybody plays him. So let's go through a little in depth on these just because I'm interested in this character deeply. Heat Smash buff, their go-to. Hitbox on the Rage Art, their go-to. Okay, and explicitly in the philosophy, they mentioned Lionheart and Up Forward 2, and I like these changes, but we'll talk about it more. Sonic Fang, first hit could hit, and the second hit would whiff, so I like that they have stabilized that, so it's more likely that both hits will hit. I assume it should always happen now, but you never know. Big Lionheart changes. So, let me pull up Steve right here. Steve's Lionheart stance has a few specific frame numbers. Right, so +7 is the most common. It happens on his stomp. It happens on his jumping stomp. I can do it. Yep, and it happens on back 1-2 and ducking back 1-2. Right, either way. Right, always +7. And this was annoying for Steve players because if you remember, Power Crush is frame 8, right? Or sorry, Power Crush is frame 7. So if he's +7 and does his Lionheart 1, he will trade with the Power Crush and lose. So unless you did a different Lionheart transition, you had to either duck cancel and block the Power Crush, weave and dodge the Power Crush, which sometimes wouldn't work, or do something like this and kill them. Right? The other option was to do the frame tight Lionheart plink peekaboo cancel. So if you hit forward 3+4, but you plinked the 3 and the 4, it's not going to show on the input display because I'm controlling the computer. But basically, with a frame tight input, you could go into peekaboo stance and grab them out of their Power Crush. It was a very frame tight, high execution thing to do, but it was really cool. And it gave a lot of expression to playing Steve. Now they've made it easier, which I don't mind. He gets +1 on all of these. So now he's +8. This means in all of these situations, Lionheart 1, where he says body, is a frame trap, right? This aligns with the situation he had on Heat Smash. So on Heat Smash, after it's blocked, do I have it recorded? I don't have it recorded. Let me show you. On Heat Smash, if his Heat Smash is blocked, he's +8 as well. So Steve already had this potential to do Lionheart 1 after his Heat Smash is blocked. And now they've basically made all of these other situations identical. So just a visual example. Steve's +8. And this becomes a frame trap even for armor moves. Okay, so more of that is great. Now he has a real scary stance coming off of a low, his 13 frame punish, some ducking moves. So if he's evading a move, he gets a bit of reward. But there's a bit more drama to this stance that I want to cover in a second. Up forward 2, forward movement increase. So it's like a better whiff punish as well for a full launch. That's pretty nice. Steve already had whiff punishment options, right? Steve could whiff punish with, if you were really quick, peekaboo up forward 2. Right? I want to look at the damage numbers on this while we're here. So peekaboo up forward 2 does 23 damage. Up forward 2 does 20 damage, right? So there's still a reward for doing the harder option, right? Doing this, go into stance manually and then hit up forward 2. Versus just hitting up for 2 by itself. And I think that's important. Rewarding the skillful option makes sense, right? To a point, right? There's such a thing as too much. But this is a nice buff, quality of life for all levels of play. While Rising 1-1 had that weird ducking bug, and then spin sometimes if you go into peekaboo after, he would just leave peekaboo, I guess. And then some more quality of life. But the big change here is they took out this peekaboo cancel. He used to be able to do Lionheart, and then with that 1 frame plink, he could go into, I say plink, by the way, as the button input where you tap one and the other. I know there's like priority linking, and I'm not a Street Fighter player, but when I think of plink, I think of like ba-ding, 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 instead of at the same time. If you did that within one frame, you could go into peekaboo off of Lionheart, and you could go to ducking indirect, which is the speed dash, right? Like the heat only extended duck. They removed that. And this is a frustrating change to me because I don't think it was necessary to remove. It was a emergent behavior technique, right? And it wasn't really strong enough to be game warping. It was a glitch, sure. But you know what else was... I don't want to use the word glitch for this one, but you know what was also unintended behavior was a Korean backdash. You know? I can't do this on P2 side on a pad, bro, but you know what I mean? This is unintended behavior. I think a lot of the coolest parts of many competitive games is unintended behavior leveraged by passionate players who do a lot of study to get really cool advantages in games. It's fine that it's gone from a Steve strength angle, but because it really didn't do much, right? At a really high level, it was almost too risky to go for. But pulling it off in a match was one of the most satisfying things possible for me. Like, if I knew a guy was going to power crush me and I did the Lionheart cancel perfectly, like this, and I was able to cancel it into my peekaboo stance and then grab him, that was so satisfying. It felt like I really outplayed him. Now my only outplay for that is just hitting one. You know what I mean? So I don't think he was getting enough reward to justify removing it from a balance perspective. So my understanding is they removed it because it was unintended behavior. And I think, I'm not a developer, but I think it's okay to leave some unintended behavior if it's not game warping. And to me, this fit that description. So I'm really sad to see it gone. This means it's probably not coming back because it wouldn't make sense for them to add back like a bugged behavior. But I do find it disappointing. Last cool little consolation change, I guess, is Lionheart 1+2. The unblockable is sped up. And the behavior on hit is modified to enable potential aerial combos. So I don't know if this means it's now a strong aerial tailspin or something else or combo ender. But they want it to be used in combos now. And the other cool little side effect of that change is Lionheart 2 was 16 frames and 1+2 was 20 frames. So if it's 16 and 18... it's a lot harder to fuzzy guard. I would say it's pretty much impossible to fuzzy the high without dying to the mid. So that's my take on the changes. I think Steve is in a better position being able to have this heat smash frame trap scenario off of his common moves that would go into Lionheart. Disappointed by the removal of skill expression. The developer's decision. Not mine. Okay. Key characters again. Shaheen, not many changes except he had like a mini infinite where if he hit you from the side with this move, he could just keep chaining it together. Now they let the attack throw go off. Like he succeeds with the attack throw. So it removes that infinite situation, which is good. That infinite would have been crazy to be hit by in an actual tournament match. Xiayou, an absolute menace in this game. One of the most controversial characters I mentioned. I did a video on Xiaoyu's AOP, and my ultimate conclusion was that AOP is fine as long as you nerf her offense. And all of the comments were just saying, learn the matchup. She needs it. Oh, yeah. Right? Like, I was approaching it from a very level-headed take of what makes the character strong, what makes her her identity. And I think the Phoenix stance, or AOP, is a lot of her identity, and she should keep that. But the people complaining didn't really stay till the end of the video for me to say that. So I like the change approach they're taking here of nerfing her Hypnotist mixed up and nerfing her guaranteed spike combo ender, the up back 4. Nerfing that and letting her keep her evasion makes a lot of sense. So this is actually one of the best changes I think I've seen in this entire patch. So if you go through all of the link changes, you'll see that they're kind of focused on that. Notably, recovery time increased by 1 frame. Does that mean it's minus 14, minus 13? I don't know how they're changing the frame data on punishability. But Hypnotist 3 has increased recovery time. Hypnotist 2 consumes more heat. And her there's a special style throw note change here. I need to talk about throws one more time in the beginning. Or at the end. It was mentioned in the beginning of the patch notes. But yeah, nerfs to her damage and her mixed-up game overall. It's not huge nerfs, if you ask me. But especially this in-heat forward 2-1-2 and up forward 2. It's where she jumps and does like this. that was doing a ton of damage. So they nerfed her combo damage mainly, which is really cool. Last couple characters, and then we'll talk about overall thoughts. Yoshimitsu, I think, is an incredibly strong character, really, really hard to fight against, and honestly really dumb because he has really good Tekken moves like basic uppercut, down forward 2. And in addition to that, he has the rule-breaking moves with flash and spin and all these other options, right? Unblockable low sword sweep. So Yoshi is in a really strong spot. It looks like they targeted mostly quality of life stuff. It didn't look like they made any significant changes to his balance. So we may have to see. I think, actually, no. He was he was mentioned as a target for 1.05. So we'll have to evaluate later. Until then, quality of life changes are nice. That's really good. Zafina. These changes are insane. I can't lie to you. These changes are insane. So they wanted to improve the performance of her new Tekken 8 moves and improve the variety of her offensive options, especially Tarantula down forward 1. Now, this is a cool looking move. I like Tarantula down forward 1, okay? This move, right? Cool ass move. Nice animation. Azazel power. I don't think they were cooking with this one, man. Look at this. Just look at the numbers here. Take the numbers out of context for a moment with me. Zafina 1-4. Behavior of opponent on hit has been modified, and the frame advantage has been changed from +2 to +22. To facilitate offense, the distance on hit has been reduced. On block, the distance has been reduced. So this move into Tarantula is currently +2. It's now +22, which makes this a frame trap. This is a frame trap now. And if that weren't crazy enough, Tarantula down forward 1 went from -7 to +6. So it's +22 into +6. They're making her a stance character. This is the biggest buff I've ever seen. This is the biggest buff I've ever seen. Other small changes, her running 1+2, reduce recovery frames by 3. And faster startup. It's now homing and it's +8 on block. I think this goes into Tarantula actually. Yeah, this move goes into Tarantula. Now it's faster, homing. Good lord. This is insane. Now we obviously have to see how it plays out. Right? Oh, this one too. Mantis stance. From +2 to +5. And if she goes into stance, +4 to +7. Now reacting to this move is crucial. It's 22 frames. It's not an easy reaction, right? But it can be trained. But the crazy part about this is at +7, she can do almost anything she wants. Right? This now will counter hit jabs. Like, this becomes a frame trap, right? You can no longer really do anything. And the worst part is you used to be able to sidewalk left almost every option after this hits you. Now I'm pretty sure with +7 you can't. We'll have to test it, but this strikes me as a change similar to the Lars change with Dynamic Entry 3. This character might be a menace now. This is an insane change. Okay, and the last thing I didn't talk about was the throw changes they talked about. So and the quarter circle back changes. Okay, so these are two big system changes that I really like. Did I show the speed kicks tweet at the beginning? It's been like an hour since I started recording. Let me know, chat. The first thing, character unique throws. So they have a lot of 12 frame throws that are insanely effective, especially as a punish to power crushes. Right? So if Law blocked a power crush and you went -12, he could just do this throw, and now he got a launch punish instead of just his 12 frame knockdown punish. Xiayou could get a launch punish, right? All these people could launch punish you for doing a -12 power crush, for example. They've slowed down these moves to 14 frames so that it makes it a bit more fair. And that solves the problem of not having to remove power crushes or throws as a punish to power crushes. All right. The other really good change on a system level, I missed this in the beginning, is the quarter circle back buffer. This tweet explains it very, very well. If you look at Dragunov's inputs here, I'm going to zoom in. You look at Dragunov's inputs. He does quarter circle back. Quarter circle back 2 is what the move looks like, right? But you can also release it early, have frames of neutral, and then hit the button. And it will still go off. It like stores the input. And at the craziest amount, like the most dramatic amount of stored input, was 16 frames. Do you see that? 16 frames of neutral before this 2 was ever inputted, and he still did the move. Now look at Dragunov specifically. Look at Dragunov's animation. Look at how long he stands still after that quarter circle back. Do you see that? Quarter circle back, and then 2. So this was causing a lot of unintentional inputs, and on Dragunov that's a big deal because it's launch punishable, that move. And why this was super relevant, especially, is people would try to duck a move and then launch with Wall Rising 2. And unless you had extremely clean inputs, this forced people to clean up their inputs, but a lot of legacy Tekken players never had this issue because this is a new change to Tekken 8. So people had to reprogram the ability to do a basic launch punish because of this change. So it looks like with this patch, they're rectifying that. Due to frequent unintended activations, it's been modified to only accept the final directional input specified for the move command. So maybe you have to continue holding the last forward and then hit the button, which is how it's functioned in the past and logically makes more sense to me than allowing 16 frames of neutral before you get that move. Jiggle, then 2. That's insane. Very, very happy with these changes. So my overall impressions of the patch, very, very positive. I think they really cooked with a lot of these changes, especially the quality of life ones, the stability ones. They're clearly looking at the Tekken 8 report hashtag and taking serious feedback. So I loved a lot of these changes. My only gripes come with the extreme balance changes prior to some of the most serious tournaments in the Tekken World Tour in the general scene. Zafina is going to be an absolute menace. People are only going to be able to lab against her for 2 weeks before she's going to show up and tear up the tournaments with new setups, new situations, and new defensive options. And we already saw with Eddy in EVO Japan that people are often not prepared for these characters. Especially, like, at least Zafina is a base roster character. Eddy's a DLC character, so it kind of makes sense that some people can't even practice against him, you know? These are huge changes. The bears are going to be a lot nastier. And although I think the bears needed it a bit, and Steve needed some help for sure, Leroy, everybody they touched, you could make an argument that they needed help or needed to be nerfed, right? Where did my page go? Especially Dragunov, Azucena, I think you undebatably needed to be touched. These are huge changes right before these major tournaments. And Azucena players who are trying to transition to this, I know a lot of players who came from Tekken 7 lost their character and picked Azucena. Now they're not sure if they want to stay with Azucena because it's not just a nerf in terms of tier list, it's a nerf in terms of overall play style. And that's my concern, is you can nerf a character to be bad, but if their play style completely changes, that's really disruptive to the competitive players, right? So I think it was necessary, but it may have been heavy-handed. That's probably the best way to put it. And the Dragunov changes are going to, I think, reward old school Dragunov players who did a lot of poking and movement. I don't see these as heavy-handed as the Azucena ones, although that running 2 change is pretty serious, right? It changes a lot of how he's navigating these situations. Ultimately, I think Azucena got it the worst, especially with the while running 3-2 being only +2, in addition to all the nerfs they've done before with tracking and only doing the first hit if it whiffs, and demanding this stance gameplay out of her out of the blue is a lot to ask. But such is the nature of playing a competitive game in 2024. We're going to have to deal with these changes. When Lili gets nerfed, I think in the next patch, I'm going to have to deal with these changes. It's a lot. And June, too. Huge changes to June. Man, this is going to be a challenging patch for people to deal with. But ultimately, I hope that the good faith of the developers to share their philosophy, be a lot more transparent, and kind of keep open this dialogue even with all the hostility happening. I personally think it's a good thing. There are so many developers who just don't even engage with the player base and just do their own thing. And that's the last thing we want, right? Having this open channel of communication is great. So let me know what you guys think. I know this was a long one, but those are my takes on patch notes. Please Please like and subscribe if you stuck around this long, and let me know in the comments if I missed something. There are a lot of character details. I'm not a character specialist for everybody, so yeah. And last note, Avum just said in the chat that this is the equivalent of the arcade version of Tekken, right? Everybody who doesn't know that needs to be reminded, and everybody who's heard it enough, well, has probably heard it enough at this point, right? This is the arcade version of Tekken. There's going to be gigantic changes at this time, so it's supposed to happen. It's just tough in this tournament season. That's all I have for you today. Catch you in the next one. Peace.